When the B-24s came out, they were quite a ways from London itself, so nobody ever bothered to go see them. So it seemed that the B-17 got all the publicity.
More than 18,000 B-24 bombers were mass-produced during World War II, yet the B-24 never received the recognition given the B-17 Flying Fortress. Don Murray remembers the Liberator this week on For Veterans Only.
This program is made possible by the Disabled American Veterans, a non-profit service organization of over 1 million wartime disabled veterans. By the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. VFW means Service to America's Veterans. By PVA, the Paralyzed Veterans of America, and PVA Sports, working for the best. And by Galaxy Tours, a world leader for national and international group travel.
For Veterans Only is a national television news magazine for America's veterans and a presentation of Veterans Productions USA. Reporting for Veterans Only is Brian Patrick.
It was one of the most versatile aircraft of its time, produced in greater numbers than any other plane in history. During World War II, more than 18,000 B-24 Liberator bombers took to the skies over Europe and the Pacific. Don Murray reports on the B-24 Long-Range Liberator, World War II's other heavy bomber.
Never before and not since World War II has an aircraft been produced on a scale that compares to that of the B-24 long-range heavy bomber. A modern miracle of mass production, built during the war's peak at a rate of 1 every 55 minutes. It was designed with range in mind. Its deep slab-sided fuselage and immense vertical tail made it somewhat of an ugly duckling. But its prime virtue, that of any great warplane, was its versatility. And yet when it came to recognition, the B-24 took a back seat to the B-17. In newsreels back home, it was the B-17 that was given the lion's share of bomber glory.
This is a story of one of our Army flying fortresses operating in the Western Pacific. The pilot of this plane is a modest young man,
proud of his crew. Captain Hewitt T. Wheelus was singled out by President Roosevelt in his speech tonight for his epic flight in the Pacific, when Wheelus and his crew
in a flying fortress distinguished themselves beyond the line of duty.
Some say it was because the B-17 entered the war before the B-24. Others that the Flying Fortress was a prettier aircraft. But still others, like World War II Liberator pilot Frank Day, say the B-17 won recognition because it was in the right place at the right time.
Of course, they occupied bases in and around London. And any newspaper reporters or movie stars who would come to London had a short way to go to the bases, to the B-17 bases. And we had gas rationing at the time. And of course, in England, they called it petrol rationing. Then when the B-24s came out, they were quite a ways from London itself, so nobody ever bothered to go see them. So it seemed that the B-17 got all the publicity.
Although the B-24 spotlight was somewhat eclipsed by the B-17, the Liberator was in fact the Allied answer to B-17 shortcomings. Design work on the B-24 began nearly 2 years before the United States entered the war, when in 1939 the Army Air Force looked to Consolidated Corporation to develop a bomber that would outfly the B-17. By December of '39, an experimental B-24 made its initial test flight and proved that it would not only outdistance the B-17 by as much as 40%, it would also carry more bombs. By 1941, Consolidated couldn't build the aircraft fast enough, and the U.S. government looked to the Ford Motor Company to fill the gap. Ford made history.
At Willow Run, Henry Ford did something nobody's done before or since. He built an aircraft in production. Every 55 minutes, a bell rang, the hangar door opened, and the B-24 rolled off the assembly line.
Dedicated on June 6, 1941, the Ford plant became the largest manufacturing and assembly plant that had ever been built. More than 40,000 workers staffed the huge complex. Many had graduated from Ford's on-site school, where they learned about the complexities of aircraft hydraulics, electronics, installation, and service. The plant was equipped to handle every aspect of B-24 building. Workers pressed aluminum, poured and cast dies, welded parts, built control panels, and molded plastics. Of the 18,000 Liberators built between 1940 and 1945, more than 8,000 of them rolled off Ford's efficient assemblies. Powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney 1,200 horsepower engines, the B-24 weighed 20 tons and could carry 10 men, 4 tons of bombs, and 5,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition. Despite its massive bombing potential, the B-24's early career was marked by the largely non-operational, although vital task of ferrying supplies. No other Allied aircraft could match its transport capabilities. But as the war continued, the B-24 was being used in every theater of combat, and in 1943 proved its versatility. German U-boats traveling in deadly Wolfpack formations were endangering the Navy's supply mission in the mid-Atlantic.
And they were sinking one Liberty ship, one supply ship a day. And they sank a total of 504 of these supply ships. It got to the point where we just couldn't get supplies over to England, and we're about to lose the war.
To counter the threat to the Lend-Lease lifeline, the Navy called on the long-range depth bomb-carrying B-24. The Army Air Force later told the story like this.
The enemy operated almost unimpeded along the vital shipping lanes. Plenty of good hunting. First for them, but after May 1943, for us.
B-24s from the 1st Bomber Command and the 25 squadrons of the Anti-Submarine Command bore down on the Wolfpacks.
When they were spotted, Hitler's sub-crews crash dived.
When Liberator forces were finished, the Atlantic was free of Nazi subs, the Navy could carry on with its mission, and the B-24 was proving an invaluable tool in the Allied offensive. Over Berlin, Liberators and Fortresses joined to form a force 1,000 bombers strong. The strike left a 2-mile section of the city in flames, including the German War Ministry, Gestapo headquarters, and Hitler's Ministry of Propaganda. In the Pacific, the Liberator virtually replaced the B-17, striking Japanese-held airfields and resources for capture and use by Allied forces. But perhaps the most decisive strike to the Liberator's credit was the destruction of Hitler's Romanian oil barrow.
I have called you in today to discuss future air operations against Ploesti oil refinery. This strategical air force, during the next 3 days, will attack continuously, night and day, with maximum effort against all refineries.
The 18-square-mile enemy oil farm supplied German forces with 1/3 of all of the oil they needed for lubricating their guns, greasing their tanks, and flying their aircraft. Then Army Captain Ronald Reagan describes the feelings of bomber pilots bound for Ploesti.
Most of us were veterans by the time the Ploesti show started. During that winter, we'd been over Regensburg, Steyr, Budapest, Győr, Wiener Neustadt, Vienna. Those targets had been plenty rough going, but we always went through. If that's called a baptism of fire, we'd had it. We were ready for Ploesti. But don't get the idea that we were cocky. It doesn't take long in this business to learn that there are no milk runs.
And Ploesti was far from a milk run. The bombers and their fighter escorts were greeted by flak from below and enemy fighters on high. But Frank Day, who helped knock out Ploesti, says he didn't think about the danger until after the job was done.
You know, you were busy flying an airplane. In fact, most of the time you didn't even have time to think about enemy fighters or the flak. You had to look at the adjacent ship, your flying formation. The other pilot that wasn't flying at that time was checking your cylinder head temperatures and your oil gauges and your gas and all the other instruments. So, you know, you were pretty preoccupied and busy. You just didn't say, oh, am I going to get hit? You know, you were busy working and flying. You had a job to do. Everybody had a job to do. And then when we got to target, of course, then it was the bombardier's job.
and the bombardiers did do a job on Ploesti, eventually shutting it down, but at a considerable price. During one mission, 177 B-24s flew out, only 120 returned. 57 were shot down on the way and over Ploesti. It was during this mission and more than 300,000 others that thousands of Liberators and tens of thousands of Liberator crewmen paved the way to Allied victory.
And now, we were shaking hands with fellows we thought we'd never see again. It was just one of those days.
Today, it is ironic that of the world's most heavily numbered aircraft, only one remains. The All-American was born from a heap of scrap that experts called irreparable. But fortunately for the thousands of B-24 crewmen who will see the All-American during its whistle-stop tour through the United States, Caroline Collings believed otherwise.
We read that there was a B-24 available in England. It was advertised in Trade of Planes, so it was not a secret. A lot of museums from this country had gone to England to look at the plane, and they came back saying that it would never fly again, it was not worth restoring. So it really took a naive female to go to England and not know as much about aviation as, let's say, the Smithsonian or Wright-Patterson or the CAF or some of the larger museums and say, oh, I think it might be possible.
It took 4 years to rebuild, but with the help of contributors of both money and parts, the All-American touches down at air shows, festivals, and cities throughout the country so that former flyers can share their experiences through the world's last Liberator.
We had 132 checks, if I remember correctly. And we'd go through this whole list. I had certain things I checked. Co-pilot had his checks. The pilot had his checks. And they all were coordinated, and you always read them. Nothing was done by guesswork.
Oh, you had a list that you checked?
I had a checklist. It's hanging in here somewhere.
For these men, especially those who have not seen their aircraft since the war, it is an emotional experience with bittersweet memories.
It's mixed emotions, very much. You think about a lot of people. I have friends that can't be here, that would be here. So, yeah, I can't explain it all to you.
And it's a fulfillment of a dream for a lot of them because they were all young kids, young guys when they left in their early 20s. And they've gone the last 40 years or so, never even seen one. We have them come out and get up on the flight deck or just stand and look at the airplane with tears running down their cheeks because there's so much memory involved. You know, it was such an important part of their youth and their maturity. A lot of them became men riding around one of these things.
The B-24 bomber is nearly 50 years old, and through the young All-American, the Liberator might one day be fully recognized for all it did to win World War II. For Veterans Only, I'm Dawn Murray.
The All-American will be spending the month of January touring the state of Florida, including dates in Jacksonville, Miami, and Tampa, St. Pete. For more information on the schedule of the plane, write to us here at For Veterans Only, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky, 40201. That's For Veterans Only, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky, 40201. If you've ever attended a military or veterans reunion, you know how much fun it can be. If you've ever planned one, you know what a nightmare it can be. Mary Miller reports help is on the way for the behind-the-scenes planners who can either make or break your event.
Welcome to the School of Military Reunion and Meeting Planning, a one-day crash course in how to hold a function guaranteed to fly. It was actually run at a Sheraton hotel, the brainchild of hotel exec and Marine Corps veteran Bill Messangelo. He admits he wants business for his chain, but also sees a real need out there.
There are thousands of military reunions, 3,000 or 4,000 a year that are held out there. The people who run the reunions are volunteers, and the volunteers are doing it for the very first time for the most part. There's no history and there's no training they have to bring to the experience of doing it. So they just kind of plod along, and we think we can educate the consumer to have them be better planners.
And so the 87 students here are meeting coordinators for a host of military and veterans organizations. These faculty members are experts in just about any area involved in a group function. And by day's end, every area had been covered.
Is that user-friendly? Is that enough material? Am I going to sit down because this is the only thing I'm going to read today and read this cover to cover? Or do I want, as you suggest, an invitation, something exciting, glamorous, bang, hits me?
There were rap sessions on things like promotion, new ideas, hotel negotiations, and large group problems. Tipping apparently wasn't too popular a topic, just the breaks, I guess, when you're looking to keep costs down. Whoops, there goes the school bell. Time to change tables and topics. Lunch included guest speaker Lieutenant Colonel Richard Johnson, author of How to Locate Anyone Who Is or Has Been in the Military.
But what if we had a reunion and no one came? You wouldn't like it. The hotels wouldn't like it. The airlines wouldn't like it. No one would like it. And the biggest problem we have is finding former members. In our country of instant coffee and instant success and instant wealth and instant this and instant that, when it comes to finding people, there is no instant solution.
More academic presentations were scheduled in the afternoon.
Can you just close your eyes and see the rooms with all these tables decorated with the ting-ting and nereid lilies, rubrums from Holland, iris from Holland. You will find that at that banquet, again, when you go home and you have all the pictures, you will be able to say that flowers really did make a difference.
The bachelor's program included tips on flowers and decorations, airlines, car rentals, video coverage, and entertainment. The master's program, for those with yellow ribbons who went through this exercise last year, learned about food and beverage options. One piece of good news, the days of rubber chicken dinners are over. People want better and more adventuresome. An afternoon break with a South Pacific theme commemorating the 50th anniversary of the play provided yet another lesson in creative event planning. Final tips were provided on things like favors, billing and accounting, room selection and setup, and how to get people back to your function next year. It was a day that won top honors for a couple of students by means of a rather unorthodox selection process.
Shake it up a little bit and dig in there and close your eyes and pull out a name, and we'll see who would get the highest grade point average for the master's program.
I like it. Congratulations. Oh, geez. That's great. All right, thank you. Thank you. Speech? No.
A final reception to honor World War II veterans gave students a chance to pick up their coveted diplomas and reflect on what they'd learned.
Getting people to send in their registrations earlier than they usually do. They usually wait till the last minute. And we got some very, very good ideas on that.
How to contact people that you don't know where they are now. Mr. Johnson from San Antonio brought us a great deal of information about that. Others, motivation-wise, promotion-wise, certainly gave us some ideas that I had never thought before about.
It was wonderful, very stimulating, real good exchange of ideas from people that have been doing it for a while, and lots of creative insights into how things could work for other people.
This is blowing my own horn, but I've learned that I'm at least 75% are right most of the time now. And apparently the correct thing to do is what I have been doing.
It was very rewarding, and that I have a lot of knowledge now of marketing and planning for meetings and how to go about choosing hotels and airlines.
Reaction to this planning conference was so enthusiastic, organizers plan to take their show on the road to San Antonio, St. Louis, and Nashville for starters. A lot more military functions these days clearly mandates a lot more expertise to make them truly memorable. For Veterans Only, I'm Mary Miller in Vienna, Virginia.
In the time since the Vietnam War, VA medical centers are seeing fewer service-related eye problems. But because our population is aging, many more veterans are losing their sight. Dennis West explores the assistance available to sight-impaired veterans on this week's VA Hotline.
Only about 15% of all blind people are totally without sight. Most, however, are debilitated by one of the many conditions which rob only a portion of the ability to see. Loss of sight to any degree can cause a sense of fear, depression, and loneliness. The ray of hope visible to all veterans with visual disorders shines through the work of the Visual Impairment Services Team, or VIST program. Penny Shuckers is one of the 62 full-time VIST coordinators working in VA facilities across the country.
Well, the Visual Impairment Services program is here at the VA for two main reasons. The first is identification purposes. What we try to do is identify all of the veterans who are legally blind and severely visually impaired. The second thing that we're here for is to make sure that that those veterans are receiving the benefits that they are entitled to.
A part of those benefits mean eligible veterans receive a complete physical exam.
This examination is to attempt to find out the patient's general health and perhaps discover problems that he has that perhaps he might not be aware of. And this is apart from his eye problem, but it's all for his general well-being.
A person may have some sight, but still be diagnosed as legally blind. The extent of blindness is described in terms of acuity, sharpness of vision, and visual field, the range of vision.
For example, I could be centrally blind, if you will, and still see somebody coming at me from the side. I could see that that piece of furniture over to the right of me is there while I'm still able to look at you. So that's your peripheral vision. Of interest, somebody who might have severe glaucoma and have only a central tunnel of vision and be able to see nearly 20/20, he will probably be more debilitated in terms of daily activities than someone who had excellent side vision.
Many sight-impaired veterans are referred to one of 5 blind rehab centers for support and training in a variety of areas.
Rehab medicine prepares the veteran to go back out into the mainstream of life and to participate and be as active as they can possibly be.
A part of the preparation calls for taking a different approach to daily living tasks. With practice, these simple skills become less frustrating for the blind veteran.
The one thing that we want to make sure that they can do is to be able to use their hands to help take over as much as possible for their eyes, particularly in feeding and dressing kinds of things, bathing, because you have to use your hands to tell temperatures and things like that. The other thing I was doing was also looking at whether he has any decrease in smell, because smell can often indicate whether their clothes are on fire or whether something's burning on the stove, those kinds of things. It's very important for their sense of smell to be intact as well.
Charles Donahue's eye problems were detected in 1952. He has suffered a gradual loss of sight and is now totally blind in his left eye. It wasn't until recently that the VIST coordinator, Penny, got him involved in the program.
Which I'm glad she did, because she gave me a lot of light on what is available for the blind person, whether he be legally blind or totally blind. They have a lot to offer you. If you go in there with an open mind, I think you can learn quite a bit.
Army veteran David Forrest admits his feelings were a bit different at first.
I went down there with a big chip on my shoulder, feeling sorry for myself. And they get rid of it. Give me some confidence back. No more apprehensions. I'll just go out and do it now. Best thing that's ever happened to me.
But the main thing that gave me that confidence that I didn't have, I had lost. And, gave me the nerve to get back out there and try it again. But, that's the main thing I got out of it. Just being around those 30 veterans every day made a big difference.
The Visual Impairment Services team involves many disciplines aimed at helping the legally blind veteran achieve independence. An important part of its mission is to identify those veterans with visual problems and make them aware of the services available. If you are a veteran with a vision problem, contact your nearest VA medical center and ask for the VIST coordinator. For Veterans Only, I'm Dennis West.
This week on Veterans Mail Call, Bradley Bice of Fergus Falls, Minnesota writes, I would like to bring your attention to a valuable resource for veterans. In most states, there are county veteran service officers that can be located via the white pages in the telephone book. They can help veterans who seek VA benefits. And from Wilkesboro, Pennsylvania, a viewer writes, by chance, would you consider doing a program on the service of the Merchant Marine veteran during wartime? The answer is yes. Keep watching for details. And W.D. Gilpin of Amarillo, Texas says, as a former Kentucky resident, I want to know if Kentucky has ever paid a Vietnam bonus. Kentucky will pay a bonus to its Vietnam veterans in 1990. For more information, write VA Hotline, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky, 40201. And Dr. Craig E. Gibson of Nags Head, North Carolina writes, I'd like more information on the DAV-sponsored fishing tournament. I live in North Carolina and would be interested in sponsoring such an event. Many have written asking the same question, Dr. Gibson. For complete details, write to For Veterans Only, P.O. Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky, 40201. And finally, Master Sergeant G. LaFrance writes, you folks are doing a great job, but you don't leave your address up long enough for people to write it down. Please, a few seconds longer. Next week on For Veterans Only, we'll feature two veterans who travel the country motivating students to be the best they can be. Their styles differ, but Drew Brown and Bob Whelan have a similar message, and each presents it in his own dramatic way. Until then, I'm Brian Patrick. Join us again next week on For Veterans Only.
A VHS copy of this or any For Veterans Only program is available for $19.95 plus $2.50 postage and handling. To order, send a check or money order to Videotape, care of For Veterans Only, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. Please specify subject matter and content of the program. A transcript of this program can be obtained by sending $5 to Transcripts, care of For Veterans Only, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201. Please specify subject matter and content of the program. That's Transcripts, care of For Veterans Only, Post Office Box 1777, Louisville, Kentucky 40201.
This program is made possible by the Disabled American Veterans, a nonprofit service organization of over 1 million wartime disabled veterans. By the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. VFW means Service to America's Veterans. By PVA, the Paralyzed Veterans of America, and PVA Sports, working for the best. And by Galaxy Tours, a world leader for national and international group travel. The producers thank this station and other public television stations for their assistance in making this program available. For Veterans Only is also telecast by the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service for the benefit of the men and women serving on active duty in our armed forces, at home and abroad.